Hey guys, want to be able to customize text within your webpage like this? Well, stick around to the end of the video and you're going to find out how. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to open up our text editor. Now, what we want to do is !enter to give us our base HTML document. And now we're going to create a div, use n to go to the end of the line, and then let me create 3 paragraph tags like so. And p. Okay, now within these paragraph tags, what I'm going to write is little text, big text, and wow, look at me. And now within this div, what I wanted to do is I want to include a span. And I know I've not talked about what a span is, but basically a span singles out text within a tag, for example a paragraph tag or heading or whatever, or a div like this, and it basically just allows you to individually style that text separate from the other text within the page. So within the span, I'm just going to write wow, I'm blue, and then I'm going to end this with isn't that amazing. Okay, brilliant. Now what we need to do is we need to open up a live server. So Control-Shift-P, open live server. Let me bring this live server here because I have 2 monitors. Now I'm going to bring this live server into view, and I'm going to separate these pieces. Okay, nice. That's brilliant. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a new file. And why do we need to create a new file? Well, we need to create a style.css file to reference to. Now why do we need a style.css file to reference to? Well, we can actually style text within our page using the style tag, but it's quite inefficient, and it makes your page, it makes your code within your text editor look quite, complex and messy. And by creating a new page and just referencing to it, we're just making our code clean and easy for someone to go in and edit and view for themselves. So if I go to new file, and then I'm gonna file save as style.css, and then okay, yeah, I already created a style.css page, but I'm just gonna save it as styles.css. It doesn't really matter what you call it, as long as it just has .css at the end. And then, just to make this a little easier for you guys to view, go to view, and then I'm just gonna edit to layout, split down like that. Okay, now I need to bring this down here, and then I need to delete that. Okay, that is brilliant. Now we can see everything that we're working with. So first of all, what I want to do within my HTML page is I want to reference to my style.css page. I'm going to do this by writing a link tag, and as you can see, it's already set it as a style sheet. So all I need to do is tell the text editor the name of the CSS or style sheet that I'm referencing to. So that is going to be styles.css in my case. Whatever you call it, that's what you're going to reference it as, right? So next of all, as you can see, my div has just gone off. Okay, where it's right here. So within the styles.css page, what I want to do is I want to reference to the specific tags that I want to target. So first of all, we're going to target this div. Okay, so I'm just going to have to write div, and then what you're going to do is you have to press open curly brackets and then enter, just to split it so we can see it easier. And within this, what I want to start off doing is I want to start off with, we're going to talk about a lot of different ways to style text, but I'm going to start off with color, right? So we're going to press color like that, and then we can choose any different color we want. We can write out different colors that we want, or we can use a hashtag value to directly choose a specific color we want, or we can use RGB, RGBA. There are many different ways to choose and select colors, but I'm just going to go for a red, right? Just a nice simple red. So once I press Ctrl+S, what you should see is that yes, that text changes to red, and that is absolutely beautiful. Now let's style that span. Now, like I said before, we can style our text within different tags with a span separate to the actual styling of the tag, right? So if I were to reference to the span, and I'm going to change the color of the text within the span to blue, and then save, what you can see is yes, all the text that I indicated within that span has now changed color, which is absolutely beautiful. Now, next of all, let's talk about font families, right? So within this div, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the font family that I'm working with, and to do that, all I need to do is just reference to my font family, like so, font dash family, and then see, with all CSS styling, what you need to do is you need to include a colon, and then you reference to the information that you want to reference to. So for example, I'm going to choose the font family Arial, and then to end it, you have to use a semicolon, and that is crucial, right? If you don't end it with a semicolon, you're just going to create problems within your page, within your CSS page. So now when I press Ctrl+S, I look back at it, look, that font instantly changed to Arial. So also let's talk about font stacks. Now, what is a font stack? A font stack is basically where you'd reference to more than one font with this font family text. So for example, if I were to press Arial and I were to click on that, it would come up with Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, but what I'm actually going to get is the Arial text first. But let's say if the web browser that I'm using doesn't support Arial, then it's going to either choose Helvetica or Sans Serif, depending on which one is supported by the browser, right? I mean, it's very unlikely that all three fonts would be unsupported by the browser. So by using the font stack, we're basically just ensuring that we can get the font family that we want. I mean, you can literally you can customize your own font stack, so you can include which families you want to include, but the font family at the front of your font stack will be the font that's primarily chosen, and then the one next is the one that's secondary, and then the third one is the one that's tertiary, right? But yeah, now let's talk about font size. Now, to change font size, all I have to do is I literally just have to press enter font size, and I can change it to, I mean, you can use these values here, small, medium, large, but I wouldn't really recommend using them. I would just go with something like pixels, so I can choose 30 pixels and I can change it, and look how it gets bigger. I can also use rem and ems to change the size of font, right? So I could use 2 rem right here, and I could use 2 em as well. And rems and ems are more technical ways to define font size, and it's something that we'll talk about later rather than talk about now. But if I would just stick to using pixels for now. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to talk about is font style, font weight, and text transform and direction. So first of all, font style. What is font style? Well, font style is basically just choosing whether you want to italic your text or keep it normal. So if I were to use font style, so I mean, choosing normal would just keep the text the same as it is. Choosing italic or oblique would, well, if I were to choose italic, I mean, clearly you know what would happen. My text would angle itself. But what actually is oblique? Well, oblique basically just occurs if the font family that you're using doesn't have an italic variant. So if I were to use font style italic and there wasn't an italic variant of the font family that I'd chosen, then it would automatically oblique, right? So it would compute to generate an italic version of that text. but if I were to press oblique directly, I mean oblique would practically in most cases produce the same result as an italic, only a very custom italic would have a different output than an obliqued version of that font. So now the next thing we need to talk about is font weight. So as you know, font weight is basically just how thick the text is within the page. So I can choose from all of these different numeral values from 100 to 900, and I can also choose these qualitative values: bold, bolder, lighter, normal. Now bold is basically just 700 in terms of font weight, bolder is I think 800, and light is about 400, and lighter is about 300. But if I would just go with the numeral values, as you have more control, and you can just press font weight 500, Control plus S to save that. Or in fact, let me choose 900 because I'm pretty sure. Yes, see how much of a difference that makes. Alright, now let's talk about text transform. Now what is text transform? Text transform basically just allows me to directly change the upper or lowercase value of my text. So if I were to press text transform uppercase, all of the letters within the line within my text that I'm referencing to would be uppercased, like so. And then if I were to press lowercase, vice versa would happen, like so. And capitalize, what capitalize does is basically it just changes the first letter of every word to a capital letter, like so. Now see, as you can see over here where isn't is, that didn't change to a capital letter because I didn't have a space with this span. But if I were to press space, Control plus S to save, and it saves to a capital letter as I would expect it to. Next of all, let's talk about text decoration. Now this gets a little bit more technical, but it's still pretty simple. So I can just use text decoration. And now what can we do with text decoration? Well, with text decoration, basically we can define whether we want an underline, an overline, or a line through. Those are the three characteristics, right? And I'm sure you all know what an underline is. An overline is basically the opposite, and a line through is basically what it says it is. It's a line through. Now we can use overline, we can use underline, and we can use line through all together. We can use one or two, we can just do whatever we want. And then we can also, we can set the color of these values. So for example, if I wanted it to be purple, I could just say purple, and then the color set to purple. Now I don't really want a overline and a line through, so I'm just going to remove these, like so. Now what else can I do with text decoration? I can actually set my underlines, overlines, or line throughs to have a wavy property. And what the wavy property does is exactly what it sounds like it does, right? It just sets the line to a wavy line. So the next thing we're going to talk about is text drop shadows. Now this is a really simple part. So what I'm going to do before that is I'm actually going to define, or I'm going to create a new way to reference to my HTML tag elements within this CSS page. So let's start with a class. Now what is a class? Think of a class as giving a coat to a child, right? Any child can have that same coat. And then now let's talk about IDs. Now what is an ID? So an ID is basically just a specific and individual coat. Only one child can wear that ID or that coat, right? An ID is individual to that tag. Only one ID can be referenced to one tag. So for example, if I were to give this paragraph tag right here an ID, like so, and maybe the ID would be big, and I would give this paragraph tag another ID of big, that can't happen. That wouldn't work, right? I mean, they can both have the class called big. So if I were to create a class big here and a class big here, you know, they would have the same code. And if I were to reference to that code within my style.css page, so for example, to reference to class, all you have to do is put a dot and then the name of the class. In this example, that would be big, and then curly brackets, enter, and now I have a dot big reference within my style.css page. So I'm going to set to this styling to a font size of 50 pixels, and what's going to happen is, well, I'm going to get very big text. So if I save both pages, there we go. Of course, it doesn't make sense to have little text as, you know, a class of, well, it doesn't make sense to have little text being that big. So let me just give little text an ID of small, and then within this style.css page, I'm going to reference to that small ID. And to reference to an ID, what you have to do is you have to push hashtag and then the name of the ID, which in this case would be small. So now curly brackets, enter font size, and I'm going to pick 10 pixels. And so if I save both pages, just like that, I have little text, which is absolutely amazing. Now, next of all, let's get back to what we were talking about before, which is text shadows, text drop shadows. Now, okay, let me start with this big text, and to write out, all you have to do is press text shadow like so, and then colon. And now let's talk about the format in which we actually have to write out this text shadow in. So first of all, we have the horizontal value, right? So this is the value of the text, the value of the shadow from left to right, right? So if I were to put 3 pixels, this would be a shadow 3 pixels in the right direction. If I were to put -3, it would be -3 pixels or 3 pixels in the left direction. So next of all, we have the vertical value. Bear in mind, right, we were gonna put 3 different values with a color at the end. So we have the horizontal value, then we have the vertical value, and then we have the blur radius, and then we have the color, right? So for the vertical value, it's basically what you think is, it's the up and down value of the shadow, right? So I can add 3 pixels, which would be 3 pixels, a shadow 3 pixels on top of that text, and if I were to put -3 pixels, it would be a shadow 3 pixels below. So in terms of blur, well, I'm just going to start with a blur of 2 pixels, and then I'm going to make this a red shadow. So if I were to save this, what you'd see is a shadow left and top with a blur of 2 pixels. Okay, that is beautiful. Now, as we can see, the vertical value was actually opposite of what I said, so it did go left but also went down. So yeah, just bear that in mind. But if I want to include an additional shadow, so example, if I want to include a right and top shadow on this as well, all I have to do is press comma and then tab just to indent to go back to where I want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write the complete opposites, right? 3px minus 3px, so that's going to be 3 pixels to the right, 3 pixels to the top, and a blur of 2 pixels. And you know, I'm just going to change the color to purple. So now Ctrl+S, and that is exactly what I wanted to happen. So that's how we include multiple shadows and how we include shadows. Now let's talk about text alignment and layout. So for this little text here, say if I want to have this at the right side of the page, all I'd have to do is press text align right, and this text is just going to move all the way to the right of the page. I mean, I think you might not be able to see it here, but it's just, yeah, you know, it's right at the end of the page there. Now for the big text, I want this to be centered, so text align center like so, and just like that, yes, my text is going to be centered. It's that easy. It's really that easy. So next of all, what we can actually do is we can actually adjust line height. And okay, so what line height is useful for is just big paragraphs and big pieces of text. If you want to make it more readable, you might want to increase the line height. So I'm just going to create a new paragraph tag, and then I'm going to write some dummy text in it. So lorem, enter, and I don't really want to actually word wrap that because I want to keep everything here. So now when I Control+S, I'm going to get this long line, and if I want to affect that line height, let me give this an ID, and I'm going to give it an ID of line height. Now to affect that line height, reference to the ID, line height, curly brackets, and then what we need to write out is line height like so, and then I can just change it to whatever I want. So for example 20 pixels, and then if I save both pages, the line height there didn't actually change, and I think that's because I didn't give it a recognizable on the file use. If I were to go for 100 pixels, as you can see, yeah, okay, it must have changed, but I might have not have noticed it. But yeah, there we go. The line height clearly, by writing out 100 pixels line height, we just clearly made a massive difference to the line height. But of course, within a page, I wouldn't really want this. Maybe 30 pixels would be the max that I'd ever do in an occasion. But anyway, next of all, let's talk about letter and word spacing. So first of all, within this, what do I wanna change? Let me change this paragraph right here. I'm gonna give it an ID of, let's give it an ID of spaced. Yeah. So let me reference to the ID spaced like so, and then curly brackets, and I'm just going to affect the word spacing first of all. So I'm going to give this a word spacing of 20 pixels. Now what I'm going to get is 20 pixels in between each word. So if I save both pages, I'll get exactly what I wanted, right? Now if I were to change this to letter spacing, I'd get the same thing but in between each letter, and like so I've got letter spacing. So that is it for today's video, guys. Join me in the next video. It's coming up right now.